Okay, if you're just joining us, this is Real Talk with Kike, and we are with one of the most insightful leaders and a scholar of international recognition who has served in senior positions in government as an advisor to the President of Nigeria, the private sector as Chief Operating Officer of Volkswagen, apparently when he was in his 30s. I have to put that down. Anyways, welcome again, sir. It's an honor to have you with us here, sir.
It's a pleasure to be able to join
you.
you.
Thank you so much, sir. You know, we'll be diving into all sorts of conversation today when it comes to national matters and key contemporary issues putting our beloved country in standstill. But today, the first question I have for you, sir, an active side of your career has been focused on social activism. And what has the struggle been thus far? What changes are still left to make in social structure of our country today?
Well, thank you so very much. I like to think of what has been called activism here as citizenship. Part of the challenge is that we don't have enough citizen behavior in our country. So through the years, I have tried to be a citizen. And a citizen is a concerned person engaged in, conversation in the public sphere, bringing together people on horizontal linkages to determine where their country is going. If you don't have citizenship, what you have is really capture of the state by a few. Unfortunately for us in Nigeria, what has happened to us is this failure to be citizens has allowed a small group, sadly, not the very best of us, to capture our country. Lately, I've been talking about what I call the silent moral majority and the immoral minority that has captured Nigeria. Why is this important? I think that people forget that when you think of Western political thought, through the history of Western political thought, the central issue has been morality in the public space. One of the most outstanding philosophers of governance, if you will, through history is a Frenchman called Baron de Montesquieu. Montesquieu had perhaps the biggest influence of anybody on the making of the American Constitution. He is particularly remembered for the so-called theory of separation of powers. But more importantly, Montesquieu's thesis is that the public realm should be dominated by what he calls people of public virtue. The people who are driven more to sacrifice their own good to advance the common good of all. These should be the kind of people who should be in public life. We see that that's not what we have in our country, you can tell.
Definitely.
And it's not just talking Western philosophy and Western thinkers like Montesquieu. If you come to Nigeria, one of the greatest political scientists that's ever come out of Nigeria is a gentleman from my home state of Delta, actually. Professor Peter Eke was chair of political science at University of Ibadan for several years in the 70s. In 1975, wrote a seminal paper that's been celebrated around the world. It was about colonialism and the two publics. And the central thesis of Peter Eke's paper is that, yes, in Western thought, critical thing is morality in public life. In Africa, the colonial experience somehow led to a bifurcation of the public realm between what he calls primordial and civic culture. Now, the primordial is your local village community, for example. What he argues is that because of colonial experience, people invest morality in the primordial. So a man who will not dare touch one kobo of his village association will go to the federal government as minister or something and steal the entire federal treasury, and his people will celebrate him. So this bifurcation, which leaves civic culture drained of morality, which is now transferred to the primordial, is what has defined us and what has held us back significantly in our development. So what we have now seen is that we've got to a point where not only do we have this problem, but we have had state capture. South Africans talk about state capture a lot. I just came in literally a day ago from Johannesburg. I mean, South Africa almost every month. Sit on some South African boards.
Sir, listening to you, and I think part of the things that I've been able to pick when you talk about morals, when you talk about the international behavioral issues that we have that is also affecting the Nigerians and all of that, I know that recently nations around the world are beginning to subject Nigerians to visa bans, just as the case of US, like you earlier mentioned, and even more recently the EU countries has placed us under an ultimate to meet up with strategic requirements, otherwise they impose stricter visa procurement procedures for we Nigerians. What is your take on all our diplomatic relations with other countries, and where are we falling short of all these bilateral relations with all of these countries?
There is such a thing as a perception of national character, and sometimes we don't pay enough attention to these matters. I mean, as long ago as more than 15 years ago, I had occasion to be chatting in the company of a gentleman called Tony Uranta with a senior American embassy official, and he said, look, let's be fair, let's be honest. The perception of Nigeria's national character is of a community of crooked people. It can annoy you as much as it does. It is probably untrue and unfair, but we've allowed a few crooked people to dominate how people see us. And they've played in international business transactions, they have played in political activity. So that when you look into Nigeria from outside of Nigeria, what you just see, a bunch of criminals, either as politicians or as business people, whereas these are less than a minuscule part of our population. However, we've allowed them to define us, which is why I talk now about the moral majority that stayed silent. Indeed, I've just written a book that's titled Why Not?
Why Not? Yeah, we are getting there.
Okay.
We would get there.
In writing that book, I talk about the complicit middle. We cannot continue and pretend that, it's not our problem. In a manner of speaking, in keeping quiet, in not becoming citizens, we become complicit.
Yes. It's a collective issue.
So we can't get away from pretending it's those people.
So, sir, a fortnight ago, the federal government released 1,000 Boko Haram's members. Nigerians are questioning: is this a right decision, or a blatant display of nonchalant attitude for our securities and safety in Nigeria today? Because I'm curious, what could have happened that they would say that, in quotes, that these are people who allegedly are what's it called now? Repentant. Thank you, Chioma.
Well, I have not been close to the process to know what was done or not done. Part of the process of healing in any conflict involves trying to reprogram people who have a perception that is not appropriate. If you think that you are successful at reprogramming them, just like you send to jail somebody who's done something wrong, you correct. That's why prisons are correctional facilities.
But for the likes of Boko Haram.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because I am not involved, I don't know what was done or not done. I would be presumptuous to say they've not done what they should do, or they have done. If I had more information, I could be more categorical in the statement that I make. So I wanted to give that caveat. But I do think that we are facing an existential threat as a people from these insurgencies, and we need to be very, very careful how we handle them, so that we don't just provide a pipeline for them to come out and go back and just increase the misery of the Nigerian people. Yes, it's good to put them through a rehabilitation program. Yeah. How well that has gone is very critical to deciding what to do with people who have been arrested in the process.
All right, before we go on the break, I think because you mentioned your book earlier, and you said, and I quote, you said, if you are a patriot, Nigerian can bring you to tears. you said in a recent keynote engagement in your book titled "Why Not?" Have you gotten to a point of irrevocable damage of all hopes are lost in the generation to make this country a better Nigeria?
Well, first of all, I am by persuasion a Christian, and the central definition is hope.
Yeah,
you can never give up. Despair is the ultimate sin. It's the sin against the Holy Spirit. So I would never despair. And so I keep always hoping. But we've gone down a very, very rough patch. I think that everybody must now really take on that citizen fighter to rescue our country. We have come so far down that you wonder if there's further to fall. I often tell a story of being at INSEAD in 1993. This is the European International School of Business Administration that is in Fontainebleau in France. And there was a professor, an American professor from the Stern School of Management in New York, who was teaching a class on global finance. And he gave an example of an incredible country that he once visited. And the story, we won't have enough time to tell the story on the program like this.
Yeah.
But by the time he was done talking about his one visit to Nigeria, from the fact that as soon as the aeroplane landed at Lagos, as he called it, the aircraft was still taxiing, people were getting up, he thought the plane was on fire, but they were trying to get their luggage while the aircraft was still moving, to how the customs and immigration people tried to extort something from him, and the whole class, full of CEOs of major companies from around the world, was reeling in laughter. And, the closing point of his remarks was, what I can never figure out about that country is that some of the smartest people I've ever met in my life come from that country. And how it is possible that this country that produces such smart people every day seems to load a machine gun and begins to shoot itself in the foot, I can't figure out. This was Ingo Walter, 1993. It says, but the day, and it says the country will continue falling and falling and falling until there's no further to fall. So when they get there, they will look each other in the face and say, what have we been doing to ourselves? That day, I want to assure you, those guys are so smart, they'll come back so fast. It's something I've held on to for years, but I keep asking myself, where's the bottom? It will fall. I said, no, it can't get worse. Then it gets worse. Then it gets worse. We just have to keep working and praying.
Sir, in few words, I know that we're going on break now, and we've brought the stakeholders regarding Operation Amotekun. I just need your take. I need your opinion on Operation Amotekun. I know Fulani herdsmen are the geopolitical challenges affecting us in Nigeria today. What's your view on this issue, Operation Amotekun?
If I was around, I would have written the book on Amotekun. It was so necessary. The question is, why did we wait so long? And I'm even upset that they are watering the whole thing down by playing these political games. See, I grew up in Ibadan.
What do you mean by political games?
You see what they're drafting now as the laws. They're taking the meat out of the strategy. And they should not go that way.
Why, sir? How? What do you mean by taking
the meat? You see, I think the governors are beginning to pander to the geopolitical games instead of facing the real problem of security of the people. They are beginning to want to look good before IG, before AG, before those kinds. This is not what we're talking about. We're dealing with an existential crisis. Until they can respond. This thing started not because the governors wanted to do anything, because the people had enough. It's a people thing, not a political governance thing.
That's the reason why we brought the issue of community policing.
So, community policing is something Nigerian police has been always confused about. They know that it is necessary, they know it's important, but the game of power prevents them from doing the needful. I mean, more than 15, when Tafa Balogun was still IG, there was a conference on community policing which they invited me to speak at. I think Innocent Chukwuma, who is now the Ford Foundation Director for West Africa, was the primary organizer from the NGO he used to run at that time. Community policing is at the heart of policing in every society. It is not because the police has extraordinary gate or whatever in the UK or the US. It's because they are embedded in the community. That the old woman who's sitting in her front porch, on her front porch, and looking, knows somebody who is not in that community who has just walked past, and will quickly call the police to say, look, well, that does not exist in our country, because are you sure the police is your friend?
Yes, sir.
Because that is a question. Look at the problems we're dealing with in Shagamu and all of that. So the need for community policing has always been there, but the police has refused to police the community because power is needed by somebody in Abuja.
Thank you so much for that. I think that he has nailed the issue on the are you sure police is your friend. You guys, we will go on a quick break. Do not touch that we are speaking to the only professor in Nigeria, at least for me, Pat Utomi. We would go on a quick break. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Yeah, we are going to be the one to champion our own thing. Instead of look at some of the traffic issues. I don't know where you're situated in this morning. That some of the challenges that we face this morning when it comes to traffic and all of that. I believe that by now we should not be going through all those challenges anymore. If there is synergy between Lagos State and Ogun State, that's better and all of that. There should be a proper way that is unfortunate.
I can tell you what I told Bola Tinubu in 2000 about what should be done with the Lagos strategy, mega city. So they don't think mega city. Think Lagos, Ibadan, megalopolis.
Oh no.
If you look at the Washington-Boston corridor.
All right, welcome back from the break. We've just been talking about all sorts of things when it comes to politics and governance and policies and all of that. But anyways, if you're just tuning in, this is Real Talk with Kike, and we have Professor Pat Utomi on the show today, discussing with us contemporary issues and giving us perspective of solutions regarding some of the issues that we've been facing in our country today, or some of the crises affecting us in Nigeria. But if you want to call in to share your own contribution or question and all of that, please kindly call us on 0700 923 923 923 0700 923 923 923, or you can send us a message on 0817 313 6193. And of course, we have with us the only professor with integrity, and I mean what I'm saying because I've met all sorts of professors in my life, but this is a man of honor and integrity. Thank you so much again for joining us today, sir. We feel so honored for welcoming our invitation. So the next question I have to ask you, we don't have citizenship behavior in Nigeria, which was part of the things that you've emphasized earlier. I want to swing along with you on that, because not all sides, especially when it comes to we Nigerians, we are always complaining about the system determined by many components, so to speak, and that's part of the challenges that we've been facing today. So, Prof, what's your own citizen behavior, and how can it help us move forward in Nigeria today?
Well, as a young person, I made a simple determination that I should never comment about something that I don't do something about. I should never say something, whether privately or publicly, and not make an effort to change that thing. How far my effort goes is another matter, but I make genuine, honest effort to meet other people, discuss them. I mean, if you take, it goes back, I was going to joke on talking about Amotekun. I lived in Ibadan during the Agbekoya years, I went to Loyola College back in those days. And I have always, I hate bullies. I can't deal with bullies. And any time or in any circumstance I see a bullying, I get involved. From secondary school, most of the time that I was in trouble, that I was punished, it was because somebody bigger than me was bullying that person. And I would come in and say, you can't do that. And then I would get into trouble and I would get punished.
Yeah.
But and that's the way I define my engagement as a citizen. It's continued from that. When I came back from grad school in America in 1982, one of the first things that I encountered was a man passing away, cancer. And his wife goes from being the madam of a 7-bedroom mansion to being homeless. The relatives have taken away the properties, taken away everything. This woman is out like in the cold. And I said, this is not right. That's how I started a process of working with poor widows, which I've continued till this day. And people don't realize that anything that happens to that person next door can happen to you tomorrow.
All right, thank you so much. Because of time, we have loads of questions, but I know that very soon we'll be extending our time. But what should we expect from your political aspiration in coming years? I must ask you this personally: will someone like you ever win election in this country, Nigeria?
I think for now, what I have discovered, and it's important to engage. People sometimes ask, why did you? Don't you know these people are? If I didn't engage, I won't find out as clearly as I found out. I've made my contributions in different ways in our country. Getting active politically was because people came to me and said, look, we want people like you. I said, okay, if you people want, why not? I'll make it. What I found out is that no really serious leadership can emerge from today's Nigeria, the political space.
No what?
No serious leadership can emerge from the contemporary Nigeria. I mean, we'll have a few spots here and there of people who have become, lucky, or this, and the system has just allowed. Definitely. But they can be held back.
Definitely, we will be bringing you back soon. But there's another question I need to ask you right now before we go, because I know that you're, without a doubt, you're a man caught up in different preoccupation and engagement. How do you catch up with life on the slower lane of Lagos, especially with all this traffic and all the preoccupations that is ongoing?
Actually, I run a very simple life, actually. At 5 o'clock, I'm up every morning. Less than an hour later or so, I'm in church. Immediately after that, I'm on my seat when I'm in town. My biggest problem is travel, because I'm around the planet, constantly in the move. But I just run it's a paced one, and I'm not a night person. So almost every night, unless something extraordinary is happening, you will find me at my home by 7:30.
I can actually testify to that. Anyway, thank you so much again for joining us today. Our closing remarks, courtesy Omoloabi personality from Goldberg, is Omodegbon Agbagbon Lafida Ile Ife, which implies that harmonization of knowledge and wisdom from the young and old sets the foundation of every great nation. And listening to our prof today, the one and only Pat Utomi, the man of integrity, I need to emphasize on that. I know no wisdom is dispensable in the course of development and finding solutions to all the challenges we are facing in our country today. So thank you so much for joining us today, listeners, and thank you again to our prestigious professor. We appreciate you. Thank you so much. I will be back next week, same time, same station. Bye for now.